Good morning to you, Lord Young.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about Lucy Connolly. That's a name, of course, that we've all got to know over the last best part of a year. She's a former childminder. She's also the wife of now a former Tory councillor. He was a Tory councillor at the time. And she wrote a post on the day of the Southport attack, around the time that all the rumours were milling about that it was an asylum seeker who had committed that awful attack that left 3 girls dead, many others stabbed. She wrote in a post, and I can't read out all the words because it is absolutely horrific. Mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels, she used the full word, full of the B word. For all I care, if that makes me racist, so be it. It was viewed 310,000 times in the 3.5 hours before she thought better of it, and she deleted that tweet. A few days later, she found that she was arrested. She was in a police cell. She wasn't able to contact a criminal barrister, didn't know how to do so, and was told that she'd be held on remand until any trial, so it was better if she pleaded guilty and she'd get a lesser sentence. She pleaded guilty. She was sent to prison for a whopping 31 months for writing that post up on the X-site for less than 4 hours. Today, she is appealing for the first time her sentence. First of all, do you think there's any chance that she will actually succeed in that appeal?
Well, we're hoping so. The Free Speech Union is paying for her barrister, Adam King, and he has a good track record in cases like this. He was the barrister who acted for Jamie Michael, the ex-Royal Marine, who was charged with stirring up racial hatred because of a Facebook video he posted in the aftermath of the Southport murders. And after he had presented the case for the defence, a jury took all of something like 17 minutes to unanimously acquit Jamie. So I'm reasonably optimistic. It's being heard today as we speak at the Royal Courts of Justice. 3 judges are deciding whether the original sentence was disproportionate. I'm reasonably optimistic, but it's always hard to predict how these things
well, indeed, and especially when it's judges rather than a jury. I think it's easy to predict juries, actually, and it is interesting, the very, very few cases that have actually gone to court where people have pleaded not guilty when it's involved something someone has written or posted online, how things are going very differently than those who were convinced by duty solicitors at the time in those heady days with those riots ongoing that you're better off pleading guilty. And we've all heard, you plead guilty, you're going to get a lesser sentence. And we know, fantastic article and investigation that Alison Pearson of the Telegraph did. I know she's there at the Royal Courts this morning, backing Lucy Connolly, talking to her family and talking to her on the phone. That she was very, very scared. Never committed a crime in her life. She's a childminder. She's written this tweet. She's realised it was an awful thing to have written. She regrets it. But yeah, you know what? You're not going to, if you plead not guilty, you're going to be held on remand. She and every other person in that situation was told you're going to be held on remand behind bars until your case comes to court. And it could be many, many, many months, even the next year before it comes to court. At that point, most people would think, well, I'll plead guilty. And she pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred. But you're a Free Speech Union activist and have been for a long time, hence setting up the Free Speech Union. Do you think that what she wrote, I'm sure you and I both agree, it's a horrible tweet, it's a foul tweet, and she should be ashamed of having written it and thought it, but that it was inciting racial hatred?
I think it's a stretch to say it was inciting racial hatred. I think it's even more of a stretch to say it contributed to the disorder last summer, given that it was only up for 3 hours and she apologised after she deleted it. In America, no one would be convicted for posting something like this on social media. Yeah. They'd be protected by the First Amendment.
Unless it's very, very specific. If she'd written, right, everyone, meet me at this hostel where the asylum seekers are, and we're gonna attack people, we're gonna burn it down. Now that would be very different. You'd take a different line on that.
I think we would, and I think that wouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. But there's no question that this particular tweet would. And I think, the judge should, I think, have taken the mitigating circumstances into account. The fact that she deleted it within 3 hours, she apologised. She herself had lost a 19-month child. So she felt the murders of children in Southport particularly
Yeah.
acutely. And if you look at the sentences that other people
Yeah.
have been given. I mean, her sentence just seems completely ridiculous. I mean, I looked up this morning a grooming gang in Telford in 2013. 7 men were sentenced for a variety of horrific crimes. One man who was sentenced pled guilty to having sex with a child, got 2.5 years, 30 months. So 1 month less than Lucy Connolly for a tweet. It just, how can that be right? I cannot see how these three.
Yeah, I mean, they're hurty words. They are nasty, hurty words, but they are nevertheless words, not actions. I mean, she did say, didn't she? She wrote to some post to other people, whether it was WhatsApp or was it public. Look, I'm going to play the mental health card if the police come and feel my collar. And again, I think the idea that someone who I certainly was aware, once I became a parent, my visceral reaction to crimes against children was much greater. To become a parent, to lose a child, as she did, of course you're going to have a more visceral reaction. It's going to be a far bit greater emotion. So whether she's, quote, using that card or not, it's still a legitimate thing to claim. But as you say, this is the thing that a lot of people are confused about. We're talking today about prisons being at breaking point, these particularly men's prisons, letting people out who've committed domestic abuse, violent crimes, being allowed out early, and even if they breach the terms of their release, only spending an extra 28 days back behind bars and then being released again, and saying, well, we need to do that because otherwise, justice system will break down. We don't have enough prison spaces. And yet people like Lucy Connolly is behind bars. First offender, she was a childminder. Even the claims about there are other racist tweets, well, not if you actually read what she'd written. They weren't what you and I or most people would consider to be racist. She had character witnesses from numerous parents whose children she cared for, who are immigrant families of colour, who said they'd never experienced anything like that from her at all. The character that was painted in the court of her and in the media at the time was of a very different person than the actual facts we know about her suggest.
Yes, and I think all of that should have been taken into account by the judge. She's also the carer of her husband, who has a chronic disease, and she also has a little girl herself.
Yeah.
And as you say, many people convicted of much more serious crimes have been let out on licence. She hasn't been let out on licence. That's been refused.
Yeah.
It just seems extraordinarily harsh and disproportionate. I mean, just to give you one other example, Julia, the same judge who gave her 31 months had a young 19-year-old man up before him who'd pled guilty to violent disorder, who'd actually participated in a riot that took place outside a pub, had been involved in a mob that tried to break down the door of this pub and had beaten up a man standing outside the pub and put him in hospital. And there were women and children cowering on the other side of that door. A terrifying experience. Yeah. That man who participated in a riot, he got 20 months. A much lighter sentence than Lucy Connolly.
It's just extraordinary. And it's not justice when it's not fair and it's not meted out equally. Is Lucy Connolly, to all intents and purposes, then a political prisoner?
I think it might be perhaps a bit of a stretch to describe her as a political prisoner, but I think there was certainly a political dimension in the severity of her sentence. We know that it was a particularly febrile time. The Crown Prosecution Service were under considerable pressure to bring prosecutions against people who
was putting that pressure on them.
Well, it feels like Downing Street was putting that pressure on them.
We had the statements from Keir Starmer saying they were going to come down on this stuff. And but the rest of the time, they tell us, look, these decisions, they're made by courts, nothing to do with us, Gov.
Yeah. And back in 2011, during the violent disorder that took place across the country in 2011, there was a similar clampdown, only in this case, it wasn't for saying things on social media, it was for people who participated in the riots. Some of them got particularly severe sentences, and some of them managed to appeal those sentences and get them reduced. So I'm hoping, given the amount of time that's passed, and that she'll be successful today and will be released.
Sometimes I wonder, though, whether actually the publicity around her case is helping or hindering. I wonder which it is.
Well, it's hard to know, but as you say, Alison Pearson's piece setting out the case for the defence was extremely powerful, and I think most people reading that piece, most people familiar with the facts in this case, will think, well, what she tweeted was nasty and unacceptable, but 31 months,
Yeah.
more than 2.5 years for a tweet that she deleted within 3 hours and apologised for is just, by anyone's book, completely disproportionate.
Do you think she should have been charged with any crime at all? Do you think she should have gone to prison at all for what she wrote?
Well, I think if she pleaded not guilty and set out the extenuating circumstances, I'd be surprised if a jury had convicted her. As you said in the introduction to this segment, I think most people who've been prosecuted with saying something intemperate or unpleasant on social media in connection with the Southport murders and who've pleaded not guilty, very few have, but of those who have, a majority have been acquitted by juries.
Indeed, really interesting. And I know you've been helping and advising people. I would say to people in these scenarios, get in touch with the Free Speech Union.